Welcome to Juniata. My name's Rob Yelnosky. I work in the admissions office. I'm an 85 alum. I graduated from here with a POE in Management Information Systems and then came to work here in 2002. I've worked in finance and information technology and then was in enrollment the last 3 years. I also teach in the business department. I teach first year foundations classes. I'm an advisor as well. So I also have had 2 children go through this process. One is a recruited athlete. So I've got lots of different perspectives I can answer questions from. So anything you want to talk about in the next hour that we have together, feel free to ask anything. Tracie is our Director of Financial Planning. She also has been through this process. She's got a freshman in college right now, so she was sitting where you are.
Last year at this time.
So I'll talk a little bit about the admissions process. You obviously have already submitted your application. Where are you? Do you guys know where you are in the process?
We know exactly where we are. He is ready to go. We're just actually waiting on 2 more recommendations because Juniata accepts so many optionals compared to every other school that there were a few that we thought, yeah, let's get those in there too.
Okay.
But we are trying to, we're going to submit no matter what. We're doing early action.
Okay, very good.
He started the application process, but he's not completed it yet.
Okay, good. Well, I'll walk through then all of these options, and although we're on the other side of early decision, but just for those of you still in the process, still figuring out, just so because this definition will be consistent across all schools. So early decision is a binding commitment, right? If you're applying early decision, you say, I'm going to that school if I get accepted. So again, our early decision deadline is passed. If you really wanted to still apply early decision, we would help make that happen, but early action is now the method that's in play. About 15% of our class comes early decision, another 45% early action, and the balance of the class comes in regular decision. We read in this order, so we process applications in this order. So we just went out, you heard we have got admit letters out to students. We just went out last Thursday, and we'll continue to process every Thursday now through the end of the year. So Thursday at 3 o'clock is when decisions go out, except for on Thanksgiving, and we'll move it to Tuesday that week most likely. So as applications become complete in the early action category, we will be processing those over the next month and a half. So early action is you're showing affinity. You want to know earlier rather than later. Our timeline with early action will be from the day that you're admitted. Then there will be a 2 to 3 week window for the processing of financial aid if you filed your FAFSA, and then you'll get your full financial aid package at that time. So our process, when you apply, you're also applying for your merit aid. There's not a separate application for that. So upon admission, in your accept letter, you will get your decision. And then if you've been admitted, you'll get the merit scholarships that you will have been awarded. Then we'll pull your FAFSA. We'll calculate the need piece of it that Tracie will talk about further. We'll apply the additional need-based aid as appropriate, and then send you the full financial aid package with your net cost at the bottom of that. So that should be 2 to 3 weeks after. At this time of year, we're processing a lot of them, so it might take a little bit longer than that. But our goal would be to get the early decision folks all their information by Thanksgiving, and the early action folks all of their information by the end of the calendar year. Okay. So that's our timing at this point in time. Those are the different decision types. As you know, the FAFSA is already out there and available for you to fill out. Again, Tracie will go into some more details about that. We don't have an application fee. In terms of processing applications, what we look for when we're reading an app and making an admissions decision, 3 things that are ultimately targeted on identifying students that we are confident are going to cross the stage. We graduate here in the quad, cross the stage in 4 years or less with a diploma in their hand and a smile on their face. That's what we're looking for, right? We talk about we enroll graduates, students who we are confident are going to be able to be successful. Yes.
Real quick question.
Sure.
Did I understand you correctly in that when the decision to admit is received, the merit money will be known at that point?
Yes.
And then there's about a 2-week delay, and then there'll be...
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So merit, right at the time of admit, you'll know that number, and then the need base comes later. So we don't pull the FAFSA as part of the reading of an application. So we're not looking at financial information when we're making an admissions decision. Okay. So again, with that goal of identifying students we're confident are going to graduate, 3 things: what they have done. So what your student has done. We look at the transcript as the primary indicator of that. What classes have they taken? What have been their grades in those classes? What's been the trajectory? Have they had a problem in a class but learned from it, right? What's been the story behind that? A bad semester, something comes up, what's the trajectory? Are they challenging themselves, taking some things maybe off the beaten path? We like a curious student, someone who's willing to take some academic risks, try some different things, because they're trying to figure out what they really love, what they really want to pursue. If they haven't done that in high school and the opportunity's been available, we'll want to understand. But that will also, as an advisor, give me some information about how I might have to push when they get here to Juniata, and how we might have to identify some ways to explore taking some risk and learning from that and trying some different things. So what they have done, and then test scores, we are test optional. So if the test scores don't reflect your academic abilities, you don't have to submit those. We will look at them if they're submitted, but we will be fine without test scores being submitted. Okay? Our data would suggest that the hard work, what you've done in class, the courses you've taken is a better indicator of academic success than the test score is. What you say about yourself through your application, so the essay, and again, we're not looking necessarily for some profound statement, but the ability to take an idea in your head, put it on paper so that someone can understand it, the reader can understand the point you're trying to make, and that you have some command of spelling and punctuation, grammar, and those things. And I've said this to every group, if you want us to reinforce that message with your student, because sometimes parents can say, but they're going to look at your spelling. We do look at the spelling, right? It's just like a resume. As a hiring manager, it's easy to discount people who are not spending the time and paying attention to detail, right? So when you have an essay with spelling errors in it, or incomplete sentences, or grammar errors, that doesn't serve you well. So pay attention to that. And then activities that you've been involved in. And again, we're looking for activities that you've truly been involved in. We typically interview every student. And so if I see an activity on there, I'm going to ask about it. And if your response is, well, I just put it down, I want you to put down activities that you've actually been engaged in. We don't want just a laundry list of things. What are you really serious about? What are you passionate about? What do you want to dig in about? And we can have a conversation about those things. So what you've done, what you say about yourself, what others say about you. So those recommendations. We want at least one from someone who knows you academically, somebody who has seen you in the classroom, a guidance counselor or a teacher, and then others can come from any number of sources. It can be a coach, it can be choir director, it can be another teacher, it can be anybody who you want to provide recommendations from. So those are the things we look at: what you've done, what you say about yourself, what others say about you. And that's what the basis for our admissions decision. Any questions about any of that? Okay. So that is our admissions process. Those are the deadlines. Tracie's now going to talk about the financial planning side of things. I'm going to hang out here, so if there are any other questions that come up during the process, don't hesitate to ask. All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Good afternoon. Welcome, my name is Tracie Patrick, and I am the Director of Financial Aid here at Juniata. And as Rob mentioned before, last year at this time, I was in your seat because I have a current college freshman. So I can answer any questions you have about the financial process or the admission process as a parent, parent-to-parent financial aid director. However, whatever questions you have, I probably would not be surprised. I've worked at the college for 21 years. My first 6 years were in billing, student billing, and then since then I've been in the financial aid office. With me also is Diane Ross, who's the assistant director. She has been here for over 30 years, and Brad Williams, who is our financial planning assistant. The best ways to contact us if you do have questions, I've listed our email address, our office email, which is financialplanning@juniata.edu, and also our office telephone line, which is 814-641-3142. You can also visit our Juniata financial planning page, which is under the admission tab. So a lot of this information that I'll go over today is also there as well. Okay. So one of the roles of the role of the financial aid office is pretty much, I always say, the collector of information. So as Rob talked about the admission process, we collect that information whenever we package a student. So there is no separate application, as Rob mentioned, for admissions application for our merit scholarships. Your admission application is the application for the merit scholarship. And then the other thing we use is the FAFSA. So have any or all of you used the FAFSA so far? You've all completed it? Oh, great, okay. So those are the two things you need for financial aid purposes, the admission application and the FAFSA. And then once admission says the student is in, they determine the merit scholarship. They tell me what the scholarship value is. I put that on the financial aid award letter, then I go out and look for FAFSA, and then I complete it, okay? So, and the other thing that we also do, obviously, is we do this process for upper class students. We certify loans and outside scholarships as well. Yes?
When we went to a presentation at our high school about financial aid, one of the questions that my husband asked is that we had been abroad as expats for 4 years, and that so our 2018 tax form what we were told is that we need to, because it was an expat situation, it sort of doesn't look, it's not correct. It doesn't, the amount that it says that we made isn't sort of consistent with what we actually did make because of like benefits.
Right.
So is it indeed correct? And if so, at what point then do we need to contact your office and start talking about okay, here's what it says, here's some additional documentation.
Right.
Sort of.
Right. So the question is, because the FAFSA information that you have to report is the 2018 tax information, that information is what you have to put on the FAFSA. So you have to fill it out correctly. So that's what we often say: fill it out, answer the questions with 18 tax information as it says. But then you would want to contact the school, and as soon as the student's accepted and the FAFSA is completed, you'd want to send us an email probably to say, my tax information is this, but that's not a clear picture of where we're at. If you've had any financial circumstance like that. So some of the other things that, some of the things we look at differently would be if parents, if their marital status changes, if you lose a job or change jobs, if there's a death in the family, if there's extreme medical expenses that are not covered by insurance. Those are the type of financial things that they don't ask on the FAFSA, so that's where you need to contact the school. And an email would be starting the process, because we do need anytime we override or look at things differently, we have to document them, because it is a federal document. So that would be, as soon as they're accepted and the FAFSA is done, you probably want to reach out and send an email, and then we would probably send you more information, a couple other forms to fill out. So that's a good question.
Thank you.
As I said, there is no separate application for our merit scholarships. And then because you all have done the FAFSA, you've been through this process, you know that you have a FAFSA ID, an FSA ID, and if you do not have one, you would get it at fsaid.ed.gov. The student and the parent needs their own, okay? And you want to put them in a place where you always know where they are, because you will need them all 4 years. Keep in mind, every year you do the FAFSA, every year you receive another financial aid award letter, okay? I just did my daughter's sophomore year FAFSA over the weekend, so I have a folder where I keep all of my FSAID passwords and all the things, and then I have the other side of it is hers, so that keep that somewhere where you always know, because you will need it in the future, all 4 years, okay? You go to FAFSA.ed.gov. That .gov means that it's a government site, so that you need to make sure that you go to the correct, because it is a federal form, and it is free. So if you don't go to that .gov site, sometimes you can go to some other sites that are not legitimate, but it is a free federal form. And then again, as I mentioned, you use the 2018 tax information on there. If you have not done the FAFSA yet, we recommend that you inquire at your high school, your local high schools. I know Pennsylvania residents across the state, and I'm sure other states are like this, we have lots of FAFSA completion nights. In fact, after I leave this session, I'm going over to Huntington High School to complete it for the parents and students there. And the other thing to remember is that you can put up to 10 schools on a FAFSA. So you don't have to be accepted to put schools on the FAFSA. You don't have to be accepted, it's just any 10 schools that you want to receive the FAFSA, okay? And it'll pretty much hang out there until the financial aid offices decide to pull them in. At Juniata, we don't look at a FAFSA until admissions says that they're in. There's no reason for me to look at finances. So the FAFSA will just be out there until we decide to go look at it. Yes, a question?
I know that there's a 10 school limit. If you had an 11th or 12th school, how does that work? Is that done through the FAFSA, through the school? How do you get that school added?
So the question is, if you need to add more than 10 schools, you submit the 10, you submit the FAFSA with 10 on it, and then you go back in. You will have to take some of them, 1 or 2 of them off, or depending on how many more you want to add. So if you want to add 2 more, you would have to take somebody off of there and then put them on as well.
Okay, so you can't just have it sent to 2 more schools.
You can, but I believe it makes you take 2 of them off. Like you max of 10, but that's not to say that the first 10 won't get a copy of it.
All right.
It's just that if you add more schools, like we've had students add up to like 20 schools at some point.
Okay.
So you can take all 10 off and then put another 10 on.
And it seems like the recommendation is, everyone seems to say that you always complete that, even if you kind of know that you're not going to get any help. Is that the recommendation? Is that you should always fill that out? Or?
We always recommend, at least for the freshman year, that you complete it. I mean, some families who have had older siblings say, I know I'm not going to receive any aid from it, but we do give institutional aid. So I think it's important for at least your first year to at least fill it out. And if you want the federal loans, the federal direct loans that are from the federal government, you have to complete the FAFSA. Okay. So if you plan to, whether it's a federal plus loan or if it's a federal direct loan that is the students, you have to still do the FAFSA to get them.
All right, thank you.
So once you complete the FAFSA, so when you go on to the FAFSA, it will ask the student questions, and you guys have already been there, but it will ask student questions such as address, phone number. Some of the best things to remember: make sure your social security numbers are correct when you do the FAFSA. Make sure you don't leave blanks. You want to make sure that you use whole dollars whenever you're completing the FAFSA instead of, you don't want to have any cents on there. So it will ask financial information of the student, and then it will ask financial information of the parent as well. We often get the question, my parents are divorced, so whose information do I put on there? The answer is the custodial parent, which is the parent who the student lives with. If joint custody is what your parents have, then we always say there has to be at least, you live with one of the parents one more day, because there's 365 days in a year, so you have to live with somebody at least one more day. That's whose information goes on the FAFSA. If parents are divorced or separated, and they live with, say, dad, and dad is remarried, step parents' information goes on there. The other parent's information does not. Okay, so it's only custodial household information. Okay? Once you get to that point, and you finish the FAFSA, you have to make sure you sign the FAFSA. It will give you an estimated family contribution or expected family contribution. So basically you sign the FAFSA, it goes to the federal processor. It usually takes about 3 business days for it to get to the schools after you submit it to the federal processor. And then that's when the schools download it if a student is accepted and looks at it. The expected family contribution, or EFC, is the amount that a family, that the federal government says that a family can afford. Okay, so that is also the formula, and that is also the number that all schools use to determine your financial aid package. Okay, so right whenever you sign it at the end there, I know I just did my daughter's, it will say what your EFC is on the FAFSA. Okay. If you missed it, if you already filled it out and you think, oh, I forget what that number is, the student receives a student aid report, or a SAR, an SAR. That is basically a summary. So that student aid report is important to look over because it's a summary of everything that you have put in the FAFSA. It's also a place where if you made a mistake, you can go back in and you can change your FAFSA. Okay, so it's important to look at the SAR. And it's usually emailed to the student, whatever the student's email is. That's where the SAR is sent. There's also a process called verification. So just because you complete the FAFSA, that may not be the end of the paperwork that is due. Okay? What verification is it's a federal process. The federal government requires schools to sometimes ask for additional information from certain families. Okay? It doesn't mean you filled it out incorrectly. It doesn't mean that you did it wrong. It just they say that 33% of every school's FAFSAs are picked. Okay? And so if you are a verification family, like I was last year, so we had a good laugh about that because I'm pretty sure I filled it out correctly. I didn't make any mistakes. I did everything the way that the government wants you to do it, and my daughter's FAFSA was still chosen for verification. So what that means is that every school that's on that FAFSA will eventually need additional documentation. Okay? Some schools do it at different times. Some schools don't even do it until they know what students are coming in June. At Juniata, I do it right up front. So if I see that a student's or a family's FAFSA is verification, I'll send you a letter and say, hey, I got your FAFSA, but I need some more information. And the reason for that is that we want to give you the best and the most accurate award letter right up front for you to make the decision. Okay? If I wait till June, that could change things and you may have already decided. Okay? So if you have used the IRS retrieval tool, so have you guys, when you did the FAFSA, did you use the IRS retrieval tool? Any of you?
I think so.
Okay. What the IRS retrieval tool is when you get to the financial section of both the student and the parent, you can link to the IRS. Okay? And what that means is you can tell the IRS, just dump my tax info that they're looking for into the FAFSA. Okay? So there's a little box on the financial, both for student and parents, that if you filed a FAFSA, you can click and say link to the IRS. It'll warn you and it'll say, you're about to leave the FAFSA site. Do you want to do that? You want to say, yep, I do. You'll go to the IRS site. You'll fill in your address that is exactly how it is put on your tax return. And you tell them, yes, go ahead and submit it. And they dump it right into your FAFSA. Okay, so there's no guesswork on which line they're asking for. They do still ask you for what your wages are. If you are a business owner and don't have like a W-2, you would still put your net, your Schedule C or whatever your profit, net loss, or income from businesses as well. But pretty much that is pretty much the easiest way for that to get that information in there. It's how the federal government wants you to do it, and it is how it's much easier for schools, because if you are chosen for verification, like I was, then you're half the way there. We would probably just send you a verification worksheet and ask for copies of your W-2s. Okay? Yes, questions?
As I recall, that was it made it a lot easier to do it that way, but I think I also had to create like an FSA ID. There was some additional step that I had
Well,
to do.
you have to do you have to have an FSA ID before you can even start the FAFSA.
Oh, maybe that's what it was, yeah.
Yeah. So what I recommend, going back to my other slide, that FSA ID, I would do this part before you even try to start the FAFSA. Okay. Like for instance, last year, the week before I was going to do the FAFSA, I got my FSA ID and my daughter's FSA ID, and I waited a week just so that I made sure it all went through. Then I sat down to do the FAFSA.
Yeah, so I did it like in the middle or something, and I had to create one for my daughter as well. But I think that made importing the taxes like a one-click.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Once they verify, because what the FSA ID is basically your electronic signature.
Yeah.
So they cross-reference with the Social Security Administration to verify who you are. And once you do that, then it's a very easy process. And it's a couple clicks and they dump the tax info in there. So and they laughed at me because I'm pretty sure I did everything correctly and I've still chosen. I always say it was probably because I have too many federal passwords with all the, because of the job I hold. And so when they saw it come across, they probably said, we better flag this one, let's check her out. So
It's essentially an audit is what they're doing?
exactly, exactly. It's not, but if you do the IRS retrieval tool,
You're not
That's
going to make a mistake. It's
Right.
automatic. Yeah.
the other thing to remember is if you do that IRS retrieval tool, don't change what they dump in there, because families have done that and like negates it all. Like they'll say, no, I don't want you to put in, the amount of tax I paid,
Yeah.
and then it negates it all. So when we calculate financial aid, all schools use the same calculation. Pretty much, you take the cost of attendance, which is listed on every school's financial aid website. It's a federal requirement. So the cost of attendance is not only tuition, mandatory fees, room, meals, but also incidental costs such as travel, books, miscellaneous expenses. So when we calculate financial aid, we take the cost of attendance minus the EFC that the federal government feels you can afford to pay, and that gives us your financial need, okay? At Juniata and private schools like us, we give merit scholarships. So the first thing I do is admission says, Johnny is in and he's getting, say, $26,000 in a merit scholarship. So I download the $26,000 and then I go look for a FAFSA and look to see if you're eligible for anything else, okay? As Rob mentioned, typically the award letters or the financial complete package is sent out a week or 2 to 4 weeks after the student is accepted. This time of year I'm pretty busy, so I'm trying to get them all. They're accepting them far faster than I can get them out the door. So it usually takes me about 2 to 4 weeks. So for you that has just been accepted, if your FAFSA is in, then usually you probably hear something within that time frame as well. Excuse me. So the components of a financial aid award letter, and this is true of any school that you go to, can be broken down into 3 sections: the gift aid, the self-help aid, which is pretty much loans, and student or campus employment, federal work study. So gift aid is what we call the free money. Any money that you do not have to pay back. So your merit scholarships, federal or state grants, if you're Pennsylvania residents, the PHEA or FIA gives state money. And we also have institutional grants and need-based money. So in addition to the merit that admissions gives you, you can also, if you have financial need, get additional money through the college as well. And based on that, just a fun fact I put on there is that last year we awarded $36 million in Juniata scholarships and grants. So a lot of times when families are looking at price tags between schools, I often tell families, make sure you're looking at award letters, okay? Because every school you put on that FAFSA and are accepted to, your students should get a financial aid package or award letter, which shows all of the aid, all of the costs minus the aid, okay? And I think whenever you look at that, that is what you should compare and make your financial decision as a family as well. Okay? On the award letter, you will also have student loans. Those are the federal direct Stafford, well, they used to be called Stafford loans. They're direct loans from the federal government. So just by completing the FAFSA, regardless of need, all families receive that loan, or the student will receive the loan. These loans are the only ones that students can solely get on their own without a cosigner. Okay? They will be listed on there. Freshmen receive $5,500, and then the dollar amount goes up to $6,500 for sophomores and $7,500 for juniors and seniors. Okay? Some families say to us, well, that's a loan, that has to be repaid. Why is it on there as aid? The federal government is the lender on those, and they count it as aid. So that may be the only kind of federal aid you receive. And we are required, every school is required to put the federal loans on there as well. Okay? Sometimes the federal loans are divided between subsidized and unsubsidized. And the difference between the two is subsidized means the government is paying the interest on those student loans while they're in school. Okay, so essentially no interest is accruing or anything. They're definitely the better of the two. Unsubsidized means interest is accruing, okay? Which means from the time it hits the tuition account until the time it's paid back 6 months after graduation, interest is accruing on those, okay? If sometimes families don't have the financial needs, so sometimes they receive all of the loan in unsubsidized amount, okay? You as families can choose to pay the unsubsidized interest if you want. You would just need to contact the servicer once the loan is, the first disbursement comes, and you know who that servicer is, okay? But these federal loans are the only ones that a student can solely get on their own without a cosigner. They're the only borrowers on those loans, so they are the student's responsibility. They are designed to be paid back 6 months after graduation, or if a student leaves school. If a student does go on to graduate school, you can defer those loans, which stops the clock on repayment until you're done with school. Okay? But those are the ones that the students will see on their award letter just by doing the FAFSA. Okay? The other part, and one other thing I should mention is that you don't have to take the student loans. Some families say, well, I don't want those loans. We just put them on the award letter because we're required to. You don't have to take them, but we do calculate them in the net cost of education because the government looks at it as self-help. The government looks at it as these are 18 to 22-year-olds with very limited income or assets, and they're just giving them money and hoping they pay it back in 4 years. So they consider it aid, so we have to put it on there. But if you choose not to take them, you just need to contact the school. And just remember to add the $5,500 back into the net cost then. Finally, work study will be listed on the award letter. Every school does it a little bit differently, but pretty much work study is if a student chooses to work, they get a paycheck. Okay? We at Juniata do not place them in jobs. It's up to the student to apply for the job and get the job. We will have a dollar amount on there, but the truth is whatever a student works, that's what they get paid. There's different jobs, different types of hours that different jobs work. So whatever a student works, they get a paycheck, and it's direct deposit. So they actually have to work to receive that money. Okay? It is not required. Many freshmen either play or student athletes and they play a sport, or they're in the theater and they just don't feel they have the time. They're not required to work, and we do not take that money off of the bill. Okay, so it is not deducted off of your net cost. If they work, that's a bonus for you because they have spent the money. Okay? Any questions about the components of financial aid? Okay. So typically the next question that I receive is, okay, I have my financial aid package and I see the net cost is, let's say, $15,000. I don't have $15,000, so now what am I going to do? Okay, so some of the, and when we say net cost of education, that is the total amount of costs of the school minus the aid, and the net cost of education is what you would owe for the first year. Okay, and every school will give you one of these. So these 4 things are some of the most popular ways of how families afford education. Of course, every family's finances are different. Everybody has a different realm and threshold, but these 4 things are the most popular ways and the most used ways of families affording education. The first would be a payment plan. So almost all schools, and Juniata is definitely one of them, we have a payment plan where you can make direct payments. You can say, I can't afford a big chunk I can't afford the $15,000, but I can afford a payment of X amount of dollars. You would sign up. There is an annual fee, a setup fee with the company we use. That is their fee, not ours. But once you set up the amount you want to make payments on, you pay that fee, and then you make monthly payments to them directly. It is not a loan. It's not finance. You won't be charged anything. It'll be interest-free. But you have to have the cash flow, so you have to make the payments. You do not need to do the whole thing in a payment plan. So some families say, well, I owe $15,000. I can't make 10 monthly payments of $1,500, but I can make a $500 payment and pay at least $5,000 of it. You can choose the amount you make a payment on. Okay, so a lot of families use this as a way to help the students not borrow as much as well. And it is one of the ways I personally am using that for my daughter as well. Okay, so the payment plan is one. The next way is a Parent Plus loan. Okay, Parent Plus loans, if you are not sure what those are, they are federal government loans to you, the parents. They are in you, the parent's name, not the student. Okay. So using my example, if you owe $15,000 for the first year, you could apply for a Parent Plus loan through the federal government, and you could borrow the whole $15,000. It is based on credit, so they will do a credit check. Pretty much when you go online, they'll run a credit check. It'll tell you pretty quickly if you're approved or denied. And if you're approved, you tell us, the school, how much you want to borrow. You only borrow for the year. And if you would be denied as a family, oftentimes we get the question, well, I know that my credit's not good, so what am I supposed to do? I know I won't get approved for it. We often say, go ahead and apply for the Parent Plus loan anyway, because if you are denied, that enables your student to get $4,000 more in unsubsidized money. Okay, so we have to have the plus denial to do that though. Okay. The Parent Plus loan, the interest rate is fixed. The federal government is the lender. The interest rate for this year is 7.59%. I'm not sure what it will be next year. They usually set the interest rate sometime in late May or early June for the following year. Some of the benefits of a plus loan are that there are deferments. So some families use them if you have, for instance, you lose your job and you have a Parent Plus loan, you can defer it, which means you could stop the clock on it. So if you get loans through other places, such as like a home equity loan or something, they're going to want you to pay, whereas these plus loans are designed for education. And there are deferments and things you can apply for. Okay. So that's the Parent Plus loan. The other thing to remember with the Parent Plus loan is it will never be transferred into the student's name, ever. It is legally the parent's responsibility. We always have students or families that say, I've graduated, I have a good job, how do I get those plus loans put into my name now instead of my parents'? The answer is you cannot. Okay? They are legally the parent's responsibility and always will be. Another way of financing is what we call the alternative private loans, and those are basically additional student loans in the student's name that they take out after and pay back after graduation through banks. Okay, so some of the loan companies that are out there, Sallie Mae, PNC, Wells Fargo, Discover, the Pennsylvania State Higher Ed has come up with, it's called a PA Forward loan. So if you are a Pennsylvania resident or surrounding state, it's a really good loan that a lot of financial aid offices are referring their families to, because the interest rate is between 5 and 7%, and the money stays in the state and is re-lent back out. Okay? The difference with these private alternative loans, students need someone with good credit to co-sign. They will not get them on their own. Okay? They don't care, the banks don't care that it's a parent, as long as somebody with good credit co-signs. It can be grandparent, aunt, uncle, whoever, as long as someone else co-signs. And the interest rates depend on the credit score of the co-sign. The better the credit score, usually the better the interest rate. Okay? And then finally, the final way that a lot of families afford education are outside scholarships. So outside scholarships would be anything other than federal, state, or institutional money. Typically they come from what we call your own backyard. So checking with your guidance office would be my first advice. Looking at organizations that you as a family are affiliated with, whether it be churches or civic organizations. I know my daughter received some of these at the end of your award ceremony, which really helps because that comes off your bottom line. Families that would be another question that I ask other schools, because some schools may take their aid. If you get, say, $2,000, then sometimes they say, oh, you got $2,000, we're taking $2,000. We do not do that at Juniata. We figure if you're good enough to get that scholarship, you get to keep it. Okay. I have listed some legitimate search engines on there, because if you do a Google search, you could come up with anything. But the truth is, if a place is legitimate, you don't want to pay. You never want to pay a fee if they're asking you to apply for their scholarship. If they're legitimate, they wouldn't ask you for money if they're going to give you money. Okay?
Oh, I'm sorry, can you just back up?
Sure. The other thing to remember as well is with outside scholarships, there's a lot of them out there that even financial aid offices don't know about. As I said, I always use the example, one year we had a student receive $2,500 from Campbell Soup Company, and every year that check came in, I thought, oh, that's a nice scholarship then. I thought, who knew? Who knew Campbell Soup gave out scholarships? I didn't. So it's up to you as families to do the legwork and make sure that you get that. You'd have to do the legwork to find those scholarships. Okay? Some final words of advice. As I mentioned, don't pay for outside scholarships. Also, keep the financial aid office informed. So as we talked about earlier, if you do have special circumstances, there is no way to say that on the FAFSA. So that would be keeping the lines of communication open between us and yourselves. And, there are things that we can look at. And if you're not sure, ask us. And I also say keep your student involved. Even though we know you as parents are doing this process, that it's an investment into their future. So, they should at least have an idea of what's going on and how much it's costing and how much skin they have in the game, so to speak. So, and then ask questions. So leading to that, are there any questions that anyone has for either Rob or I about the admission process, financial aid? Anything? Yes?
When you get a merit scholarship, can that be used to pay for any portion of the total cost, like tuition and room and board? For example, if somebody got money that would only pay for some of the tuition, but you still had $20,000 in merit, could that be used for any portion of the remaining, or is it limited to
Yes,
tuition?
because when we bill tuition, fees, room, or the whole, right. So if we've had families in the past that they get a scholarship like that and it says it has to go to tuition, then we just apply the merit aid to everything else and vice versa.
Great. And is there a separate office, because I'm a military officer, so I've been posting I live in GI Bill. Is there somebody I can talk to about that? Is there a separate office that does GI Bill stuff?
My office, actually. Diane in my office, and her and I both have some knowledge about it as far as the GI. You start the process with us. The first thing would be to get your letter of eligibility from the VA.
Yep.
Okay, that's the first thing you have to do.
Gotcha.
Yep. So, yeah,
You can talk offline because it's a little specific, but.
Right, but you'd want to start with our office, and that's the first step.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Anything I missed?
Oh. No, I mean, I think the one I like to emphasize is on the loans with the subsidized and unsubsidized, and just, there are times when people let that interest accrue and become surprised on that unsubsidized loan, because they're charging interest on interest, and sometimes people miss that, and you get your balance at the end of the first year, and you realize that that $2,000 loan is now worth $2,500, and where did this come from? It is compounding, and it will compound all 4 years. So being aware of that and knowing that you can turn down the unsubsidized portion of it. You can take the sub and not the unsub. You can break those loans up and decide what you want to take from that or not. So you don't have to, it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. So if you said, I want the $3,500 that's subsidized and not the $2,000 that's unsub, you have that option available to you. And I like Tracy, my children did take those loans because it also helps build their credit rating. So as you help pay off, if you're paying credit or interest as you go, they're getting the benefit of that from a credit rating standpoint. So when they graduate, they have a pretty decent number, which can be good for that first car they want to buy or something they want to do. I saw another hand go up. No? Oh.
Well, talking about the subsidized and unsubsidized, it does get confusing. We got a letter from one of the colleges saying, it looks like you're eligible for an unsubsidized loan. Do you want to be considered for that, or something like that? It wasn't clear to me what the right answer was, and I said, yes. But I didn't know the implications of that.
Right, so if you file your FAFSA, the federal government's going to make those loans available to you, and all schools have to show them on your aid package as aid. You can turn it down. So they're giving you the option of saying, I don't want that.
Okay. But then, I guess I'm wondering, does that affect then what they're going to give you? It doesn't sound like
it shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't.
Okay.
Because just by doing the FAFSA, all families are eligible for either the unsubsidized and or portion of the subsidized.
Okay.
And that's why even if you don't think you qualify for need-based aid, filling out the FAFSA can be beneficial, because then at least you have the choice of whether you want to accept that federal loan or not. If you don't fill out the FAFSA, you'll never be given the opportunity.
Right. Okay.
So that's why you would fill it out even if you don't think you're going to qualify.
Yeah.
Because that gives you another tool that you can choose to exercise or not.
Can you go back to the first screen that had the numbers, like your contact info?
Mm-hmm.
So we can bug you after the fact?
Sure.
And you have your card with you?
I do have my card with me, yes.
Do we tend to, my husband actually feels that, he's been doing this, so I didn't do it. But do we contact his employer as well to see if maybe through his employer there are scholarship opportunities, or by using some of those legitimate search engines, is that kind of information sort of already considered?
So those search engines are pretty much, instead of sitting down and just Googling scholarships for school, those are some places that will make a profile for you, and you can say what your interests are. If you're a soccer player who's interested in biology. So it's pretty much just looking for scholarships for you. Your company is just another avenue. Your husband's company is another avenue to look for scholarships. So that's right. So those are just some places that you can look. But like I said, I've seen scholarships come from all different kinds of places. It's just that you have to do the legwork.
I've seen a lot of community banks. So if you've got local banks, they often will do not huge scholarships, but every piece of it counts, right? So.
And high school guidance office, I know even at Huntington High School, as I said, my daughter got a couple, she got a handful of them that really helped, like at least her first year. They're just 1 year only, but they definitely will help. So especially when you have really good students, start with your guidance office and see, because a lot of communities have those award ceremonies. The other thing I wanted to mention about the loans or the payment options is that keep in mind every year you can decide how you're going to take care of the balance. Every year you can do any combination of those. I know my brother sends his daughter to a state university, and he uses part of the payment plan and then he co-signs the private loan with her. I've seen families use like 2 years of the plus loan and then they co-sign 2 years. I've seen families who have college savings plans that only get them to the second semester. So every year you do the FAFSA, you can always see where you're at and apply for those loans.
You
Yes.
guys on bus tours?
No, but I gotta go meet my daughter. But I have one quick question. It's a little bit off topic, but just want to get your own opinion because you have kids in school. I've had people say, even if you can afford college, it's good to have your kids pay for some of it because they get buy-in and they're in, they got skin in the game. You have any thoughts on that, or maybe just from your own perspective, having a child in school?
I think we're both in the same camp that, for me personally, as a financial aid director, I think it's good for them to have the student loans, not only because, as Rob said, it can build their credit score,
Yeah.
but I think for every student, it's important that they know this is an investment into their future. And even if we as families are helping, which we all have to do it now because of the cost of education, it's showing them, we're investing in your future and you're also investing. Like this is serious now. This is your future. So
Yeah.
I'm in the pro, let them borrow, help them later
Yeah.
if need be, have them have skin in the game.
I'm in the same camp.
Yeah.
My kids both have federal
Yeah.
loans.
I agree. I just was curious.
Yeah, even if it's just a year or two,
Okay.
And I think that the media really scares families now with student loan debt, and rightly so. I mean, there are some students who have an astronomical amount of student loan debt, but I always say that I am living, breathing proof. My husband and I are first generation college students who had student loan debt, who paid it back, paid it forward, and we got good jobs, then we were able to do it. So it is really an investment in the